Hey, it's your old pal Lucid Stew again. The Dreams VR update is here, and I thought I would give you some quick first impressions of play mode. While in the menu system, your camera is in cinema mode. In play, it switches to a VR camera. By the way, I apologize for all the camera movement. This is my first time recording VR, and even though I made some effort not to move my head a lot, it's still very jittery. I will improve that in the future. I also haven't used my headset in about 3 years, so I'm still fidgeting and getting a feel for my orientation in actual space, so I'm sure those aspects will improve as well. And for some reason, my head seems to be tilted through most of this. I'm not sure if that's down to camera tracking or if I just couldn't tell that my head was tilted. Either way, I'll work on that. In case you didn't know, Dreams for PS4 is a creative suite and game maker program. It lets you make just about anything you want, and you can share those things with the world if you like. In addition, you can access, use, and build with all of the other things that other people in the Dreamiverse have shared, so it's just an awesome creative tool. You can see here my controller is out of range of the camera. I probably need to stand a little farther back from the camera, and also I'm just not used to staying in camera range at this point. At the moment, I'm using a DS4 like I normally do with Dreams. You pull this lever by grabbing it and moving your controller down. I intuitively did this while holding the controller with one hand, and it felt very natural and interactive. As I was saying about Dreams, for the uninitiated watching this, there is a logic system, and you can utilize that in conjunction with your artistic creations to make a variety of things, all the way up to full-scale video games. Right here I was very distracted by the vignetting of comfort mode, so I went into the menu and turned all of the quote safety features off, since I have a moderate motion tolerance in VR experiences. Back to Dreams, you can publish your works and people can play them. Of course, you can also play other people's content. So it's not just an art program, but it's like a big arcade with thousands of user-created experiences already, and some are quite good. If you don't have it, you can try Dreams out. There is a free demo in the PSN store, and Dreams is $40 for purchase. It doesn't require any special equipment. You can do everything that non-VR Dreams offers with a standard DS4 controller. But what we're talking about now is the free VR update that just occurred. Nothing extra is required to take advantage of this update except for a PSVR, of course. You can do everything the VR update offers with a standard controller. Dreams also has always supported the Move controllers, but they are not required. When you first get into VR, you are required to go through a short tutorial, which starts you out with the various safety features like Comfort Mode on. Comfort Mode reduces camera movement for less induced queasiness. There is also a vignetting slider, which allows you to keep focused near center screen, also helping in the vertigo regard. So it's nice that there are options that will allow most people to enjoy VR in Dreams the way they are comfortable with. I turned everything off and it got a little pukey once or twice. I played for about 15 minutes without a lot of regard for trying not to make myself puke, and I felt like I just stepped off a boat when I got done. I wasn't 100%, but I also wasn't anywhere near heading for the nearest toilet bowl. Everything you're seeing is free camera, so I had complete control of where I moved and where I was looking. There is no teleporting. Free movement is removed in comfort mode, and free travel is replaced by a third-person avatar moving around the scene, and then teleportation from current viewpoint to the viewpoint of the avatar. I found this to break immersion in an unsatisfactory way, which is a big reason I turned it off. However, it is effective and easy to use for those that can't handle free travel. Back to the scene for a second. This is standard VR fare, but grabbing these blocks and treating them as physical objects felt very natural. It was a little difficult at times to keep them oriented the way I wanted, but it worked well enough that I was able to throw them all over the place, then pick them up and put them back on the plinth. Back to comfort mode, one thing I will say about it is that when it was enabled, I did not feel a single hint of motion sickness, not even unease. It was pretty stable. Actually, the strap on the PSVR on the back of my head was bothering me a lot more, and the PSVR is fairly comfortable. Intro to Dreams VR, we are currently exploring Dreams VR Inside the Box. This is a demo by Media Molecule which contains a range of activities and games that is meant as an introduction of sorts to Dreams VR, ironically. I think a big concern about VR was how Dreams was going to look because visible flex have always been an issue, and figuring out satisfying first-person objects and textures has been a challenge. This is not an insurmountable problem, but it is a challenge we are still working on as a community. In this demo, MM has employed some techniques to get some extra surface texture going. Even though I looked at it rather intently, it's not immediately apparent to me exactly how they're accomplishing this texture. It kind of looks like they may be using a layered sculpt bump map style technique with some artful application of painted looseness. However, while looking at it, I had the nagging suspicion that the various highlight areas were paintings rather than sculpts. So I'm thinking it may be something like actual surface texture on a darker sculpt and then a lighter colored negative edit across the entire surface to remove ridges, and then there may be a painting on top of that to give that flat raised surface more boldness and visibility at distance. Of course, this is down to professional game makers and artists, but I have to say that Dreams VR so far looks better than I thought it would. My biggest complaint is the display resolution, which is low enough to be apparent on occasion. I didn't untick allow low frame rate, so I don't think this was a Dreams issue or auto resolution switching like Dreams does. I'm pretty sure this was due to the technical specs of the PSVR. You can see everything in the scene has nice sharp edges. I think a lot of strategic looseness was employed. At the same time, lots of things in this demo are quite tight. For instance, the blocks with the cylinder cut out have tiny scratches on them, which would be tough to keep at lower graphics cost. If you look at the scene in general, it is a small space with not a lot of different elements, so I think to some degree you're seeing designing for limitations. It does not shy away from chopping up spaces into different scenes and capitulates transitions. I think there is a lesson to be learned if a professional game design team is making that decision, and that lesson is to play to your platform's strengths. Don't try to fit everything in one scene if you don't need to, and embrace transitions as a reality of the platform. And one other thing to consider about Dreams developer-made content is that they use Dreams to produce it just like we would. They don't have any hidden capability. The only thing they do that we can't is import audio. So anything you see here is something you can make yourself if you're so inclined. And the great thing about Dreams has always been that lots of people have made lots of things. So most of the time you don't need to make things from scratch in a discipline that isn't your forte. You can just use someone else's thing. Everyone loves messing around with physics-based basketballs, but I'm going to skip ahead a bit here to give you a look at some VR gameplay. We are now in the entry hall of some doorways to different mini-games. This is a different scene we had to transition to, just to reinforce the idea that breaking up scenes is okay. These potted bamboo are quite lovely. Upon closer inspection, they are 100% paintings, no sculptures allowed. And it also appears we need a ray gun of sorts for this section, so let's check out one of these doorways and see what the gun is for. This part is kind of funny in hindsight because I started blasting away before reading the instructions, so I wasn't quite sure why the door wasn't opening. I'm going to skim through this test because the most interesting part of this section isn't the gameplay, but rather how quickly I was able to move through this in free camera mode, all safeties turned off without puking. Alright, we are in. The fact that there's a bonus for speed makes me think someone at MM is a sadist. Anyone able to sprint through this and retain their lunch has my respect. I started out slow here shooting from long range, but the pace will pick up in a second. If you're not familiar with VR, where it really screws you up is when you aren't physically moving in the same way as the camera, or you're looking somewhere in the virtual space and are moving through the virtual space in a different direction. Generally, perceived velocity isn't a huge issue, but abrupt changes in perceived acceleration can be like a gut punch. I don't have a cure for that other than to avoid it. Make a concerted effort to accelerate and decelerate slowly in the virtual space. For disparities between where you're looking and where you're moving, I do have one tip. If you are turning in the virtual space, it helps if you physically and virtually look in the direction in which you're turning. So you kind of want to keep your focus on the leading edge of your movement. I'm not sprinting through or anything, but I'm moving through this space at a pretty decent clip. I did feel a little woozy coming out of VR after this for about 5 minutes. I'm usually only able to take 20 or 30 minutes of VR like this before the aggregate sensory input gets too intense for me. So there was probably some of that in there as well. So hopefully this gave you a taste of what playing in Dreams VR is like. I'm going to try to have a similar video up tomorrow about my first impressions of edit mode and creation in VR. Lots more Dreams VR content coming soon, but that's all for now. Until next time, I'll see you in the Dreamiverse.